In 58 BCE, where modern-day France is, the Gauls engaged in a great conflict against the Roman influence under the command of Gallic general Vercingetorix to gain independence. This is one of the few times anyone ever revolted against the Romans, going against Pax Romana, which is peace between different cultures under Roman rule. This showed others that they could also attempt to revolt. This eventually led to the downfall of the Romans, however, led to Gallia being forced to become Roman under a no-compromise conquering. Rome is a growing nation under the rule of Julius Caesar, and the empire is expanding under his rule as the consul. One of the places Caesar wants to expand into is Gallia, otherwise known as Celtica. This is the area north of the Pyrenees, and is what is known to us as modern-day France. The Gallic region is run by many local tribes that often engage in conflict against one another, and are seemingly unable to band together for a united purpose. Julius Caesar beat the chiefs in this area a first time, including the leader of the Arverni, Celtulus. Julius then subjects the Gallic state to Roman rule, but many of the leaders and people of Gallia are not in favor of Caesar's rule. Due to this disliking of Rome, the village elders sprung a plan to remove the Romans and continue their own rule. Romans were starting to settle in and take control of the area, trying to ensure that the Gauls would follow Caesar's rule. This meant there were many nobles and military companies moving into the North Pyrenees to hold the Gauls to their rule. Gallic councils were holding meetings as to how they could regain their independence, ridding Gallia of Caesar's rule. They needed a leader to unite the tribes, and the elders of the council decided upon Vercingetorix, the son of Celtulus, the leader of the Arverni, who was killed by Caesar. He was decided upon as the most capable leader to unite all of the tribes and lead the rebellion against Caesar, as he already had military experience and noble lineage. Vercingetorix then traveled around with his company of Arverni to unite the Gallic and Celtic tribes. One of the tribes that did not join the Gallic resistance were the Aedui, a longtime rival of the Arverni. The Arverni killed off the Roman settlers in the area and prepared raids on nearby Roman settlements. During these raids, any Romans in the area were slaughtered, leaving some high-level nobles to be murdered, causing Caesar to be angered and vengeful against the Gallic tribes. After the retaliations from the newly united tribes, Caesar decided he needed to fight back and show that he was the ruler of Gallic Rome, so he planned a reconquering. Vercingetorix was preparing for this, however, and started planning his defense against the Roman aggression. During this war, two military strategies known commonly today were implemented: the divide and conquer attack strategy and the scorched earth defense strategy. Caesar was planning his attack as a divide and conquer strategy, and split the parts of his military into 3 small battalions led by him and 2 of his military advisors. When Caesar wasn't around, his battalion as well as military leadership was taken over by Titus Labienus, Caesar's second-in-command. The Romans had to cross the Allier River to get there, and started preparing to attack over Gallic bridges, but the Gauls cut them down. In this, the Romans prepared their own bridges as means of crossing, as they needed their horses and supplies to come with them. Before this fight, the Celts and Gauls ruled over themselves, and even after Rome took over the first time, they kept much of their own culture and beliefs. The battles to follow would end up changing and shaping the cultures and languages of France and northern Spain for centuries to come. First, Caesar chose to go on strategic attacks to take over certain Gallic points on the border of the empire. This included the Berturges, in which they fought along the Celtic defenders' wall, trying to build a ramp where the Gauls rained down hot oil and arrows on the attackers. The Romans, however, had so many builders that every time one was killed they were replaced, and the Romans finally took the city and a strategic point on the outside of Gallic territory. This fight provided more information about what the Romans were capable of, and what they were planning to do to the tribes. They proved to the Gauls that they were indeed a force to be reckoned with. This attack also came with information on the Gauls' battle plan, as it was shared with the leader of the Berturges and fell into Caesar's hands. Shortly after these sieges, the Aedui turned their back on the Romans, creating a temporary push back against Rome. This seemed to be initially dangerous to Rome, as the tribes had never been completely united before, but it was already late for the tribes to be fully rid of the Romans. Caesar's army eventually went on the offensive, with an army millions of men stronger than the Gauls. Vercingetorix, however, had an innovative defense strategy, and it was one of the first times this strategy had been used in history: Scorched Earth. Scorched Earth includes a retreat, where the defenders will burn down all of their towns and farms in order to attempt to starve out the attackers while they have to make ground over long distances. Vercingetorix and the Gauls burnt down all but 3 of their cities, where all their people went to stay and live during this defense. 2 of these cities were in very defensible positions, and the other was Vercingetorix's hometown. Caesar, however, made a lot of ground, and eventually made it to the Gauls with plenty of soldiers to fight. The Gauls threw all of their supplies deep into a nearby forest to hide it from the attackers. The defense, however, was futile, and the Romans burst through the Gallic line, taking all of the Gallic defensive cities in a short amount of time. Vercingetorix gave himself over as a prisoner to Rome, to save his people as Rome imposed their rule, but let the people stay as long as they didn't present a threat to the Roman Empire. Vercingetorix was kept for a couple years as a prisoner, but when Rome's wars were over, they paraded him through the streets and had him publicly executed. Caesar made Gallia and Celtica parts of Rome, and the people were to learn Latin and be Romans under the empire. In short term, it meant these people were to adapt to a different culture and could not partake in their own rituals and ceremonies. It also meant that their own languages would be lost in a short amount of generations. The Gallic era created a very different national identity for what is France today, as the tribes led by Vercingetorix held against and made such a great cause against the Romans that it can be a rallying point for French nationalists today. Vercingetorix was commemorated as a war hero by Caesar himself, as a sign of respect for a truly great foe, developing a sense of greatness in those who are French. The long-term impact of this event is that as Gallia became a part of Rome, the people had to learn Latin. However, since these people were so far from the heart of Rome, their spoken Latin became vulgar, and over time developed into the language today known as French, which also explains how the other Romance languages developed in their respective homelands. Also, Catholic influence spread to the area, as it was the religion of Rome and its people, so France became a very religious state, with similar holidays to those in the Pope's country pre-Italy, or the Vatican City today. Vercingetorix was a great commander, hindered only by the fact that Gallia wasn't united. His tactics were almost, if not as good as Julius Caesar's, but due to the split of the Gallic tribes, they were unable to push back Caesar's iron fist. This conflict was very serious, and led to the downfall of a very strong and independent people. The Romans left very little compromise between the two sides, as the Gauls were indicted into Roman life.